Titulo. My parents made me raise my 5 siblings since age 6 while they collected benefits. They told people I was naturally nurturing. Palabras. 2667. My parents made me raise my 5 siblings since age 6 while they collected benefits. They told people I was naturally nurturing. I remember the exact moment my childhood ended. I was 6 years old, standing on a milk crate in front of the kitchen sink, trying to wash bottles for baby Marcus while Mom lay on the couch complaining about her back. The water was scalding hot. I hadn't figured out how to adjust the temperature yet, but I didn't dare ask for help. The last time I'd interrupted her, rest time, she'd screamed at me for 20 minutes about how ungrateful I was. "Emma, honey, you're just so good with the little ones," she'd tell visitors, her voice dripping with false sweetness while she gestured vaguely toward where I sat on the floor, simultaneously feeding Marcus and helping 4-year-old Lily with her coloring book. "She's naturally nurturing. Been that way since she was tiny." The visitors, usually social workers or neighbors, would smile and nod, completely missing the exhaustion in my eyes or the way my small hands shook from the constant responsibility. They saw what Mom wanted them to see, a big sister who loved helping out, not a 6-year-old who'd been forced into motherhood. Dad was usually passed out in the bedroom by the time anyone official came around. Mom had perfected the art of timing these visits for when he was sleeping off whatever he'd consumed the night before. She'd straighten up the living room just enough to look respectable, put on her good mother voice, and paint this picture of a loving family going through temporary hardship. "My husband's disability makes it so hard for him to work," she'd explain, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "And with 5 children, well, you understand. Emma's such a blessing though. She practically raises herself, and she's so helpful with her brothers and sisters." What she didn't mention was that his disability was alcoholism and drug addiction, or that the government benefits meant to feed and clothe 5 children were being used to fund his habits and her shopping sprees. She didn't tell them that I'd been getting up in the middle of the night to change diapers since I was tall enough to reach into the crib, or that I'd learned to make bottles and baby food because no one else would. By the time I was 7, I had a routine down to a science. Wake up at 5:30 a.m. when Marcus started crying. Change his diaper, make his bottle, feed him while getting breakfast ready for the others. Lily, who was 5 by then, could mostly dress herself, but 3-year-old Tommy needed help, and 2-year-old Sarah required complete assistance. Baby Jake, who'd arrived when I was 6.5, needed constant attention. "Emma, can you handle breakfast? Mommy's not feeling well," became the daily morning greeting, though I'd already been handling breakfast for months. I'd drag chairs over to the counter to reach the cereal boxes, pour milk carefully so I wouldn't spill. We couldn't afford to waste anything, despite the fact that Mom somehow always had money for cigarettes and new clothes. School was my only escape, but even that was complicated. I'd have to get everyone dressed and ready, pack whatever passed for lunches, and walk Lily to her kindergarten class before going to my own 2nd-grade classroom. Teachers sometimes commented on how responsible I was, how mature for my age. If they noticed that I fell asleep at my desk or that my clothes weren't always clean, they never said anything. The worst part wasn't the physical exhaustion, it was the way my siblings looked at me. Tommy called me Mama Emma, until I was old enough to understand why that made my stomach hurt. Sarah's first word wasn't Mama or Dada, it was Emma. When Jake learned to walk, he toddled to me when he got hurt, not to our actual parents. I loved my siblings fiercely, protectively, but I also resented them in ways that made me hate myself. When 8-year-old me stood in the grocery store, trying to figure out how to stretch $20 to feed 6 people while Mom was running a quick errand that would last 3 hours, I'd feel angry at having to choose between diapers and bread. Then I'd feel guilty for being angry at babies who didn't ask to be born into this mess. Mom had an excuse for everything. When the social worker asked why I looked so tired, she'd ruffle my hair and say, "This one stays up too late reading." Too smart for her own good. When neighbors expressed concern about seeing me walking to the store alone with a baby strapped to my chest and toddlers in tow, she'd laugh it off. "Emma insists on helping. You know how little girls love playing house. Playing house. As if any of this was a game. The system failed us in ways both spectacular and mundane. Social services came for their scheduled visits, saw a reasonably clean house and well-fed children, and checked their boxes. They never asked me directly how I felt or what my daily life looked like. They never wondered why a 7-year-old knew exactly how much formula to mix or why I could change a diaper faster than most teenagers. Dad's contribution to our lives was mostly negative. When he was awake and sober, which wasn't often, he'd bark orders at me like I was his personal servant. Emma, get me a beer. Emma, these kids are too loud. Emma, why is there no food in this house? When he was drunk, which was most of the time, he'd either ignore us completely or become belligerent and mean. I learned to read his moods like weather patterns, shepherding the younger kids away when storm clouds gathered in his expression. I became an expert at keeping everyone quiet during his hangovers, at hiding the older kids' school permission slips so he wouldn't have to be bothered with signing them, at making excuses to teachers about why our parents never attended conferences. By age 8, I was forging Mom's signature on school documents. By 9, I was calling in sick for siblings when they had fevers, imitating an adult voice I'd practiced in the mirror. I knew which bills were most important to pay first, which generic brands provided the best nutrition for the money, and how to stretch Hamburger Helper into enough portions for 6 people. The parentification was so complete that I started believing their narrative myself. Maybe I was naturally nurturing. Maybe this was just how families worked. Maybe other kids my age could handle this too, and I wasn't actually carrying an impossible burden. That delusion shattered the day I went to my friend Katie's house for a playdate. I watched in amazement as her mother packed her lunch, helped her with homework, and tucked her into bed with a story. I saw Katie throw a tantrum about not wanting to clean her room, just her room, not an entire house, and watched her mother handle it with patience instead of screaming about ungrateful children. When Katie's mom asked if I wanted to call my parents to extend my stay, I realized I'd been gone for 6 hours and no one had even noticed. At Katie's house, children were cared for by adults. At my house, one child cared for everyone else while the adults cared only for themselves. That night, I came home to chaos. Jake was screaming in a soiled diaper. Sarah was eating cereal off the floor. Tommy was nowhere to be found. And Lily was trying to give the baby a bottle of orange juice because it was the only thing she could reach. "Where the hell have you been?" Mom screamed when she saw me. "I've been looking everywhere for you." She was still in her pajamas at 8 p.m., her hair unwashed, cigarette dangling from her fingers. Dad was passed out on the couch with an empty bottle beside him. "I was at Katie's house," I said quietly, already moving to pick up Jake. "I told you this morning. Don't you dare take that tone with me, young lady. These kids have been asking for you all day. Tommy's been crying because he couldn't find you." I found Tommy hiding under his bed, thumb in his mouth, eyes red from crying. He was 5 years old and had been left to fend for himself while our parents did whatever they did when I wasn't there to hold everything together. As I cleaned up the disaster that had accumulated in my absence, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't normal. This wasn't natural nurturing or helpful big sister behavior. This was wrong, and for the first time, I let myself truly acknowledge just how wrong it was. The breaking point came when I was 11 and Mom announced she was pregnant again. I found her in the bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test with an expression I couldn't read. "Emma, sweetheart, come here," she called, her voice artificially bright. "Mommy has some exciting news." I stood in the doorway, Jake balanced on my hip, while she explained that we'd be having another addition to our family. She spoke as if this was a wonderful surprise, as if we weren't already drowning in chaos and neglect. "You're so good with babies," she continued, reaching out to stroke Jake's hair while avoiding my eyes. "This little one will be so lucky to have you as a big sister." That night, after I'd gotten everyone fed, bathed, and into bed, I sat on my bedroom floor and did something I'd never done before. I wrote down everything. Every responsibility that had been placed on my shoulders, every time I'd been praised for being naturally nurturing, every moment when I'd been expected to parent children I didn't choose to have. The list was 3 pages long. I started keeping a journal after that, documenting not just my feelings but the facts of our daily life. Who made breakfast? Me. Who changed diapers? me. Who got up for night feedings, me. Who stayed home when someone was sick, me. Who grocery shopped, cooked dinner, helped with homework, mediated fights, and tucked everyone into bed, all me. When the new baby, Amy, was born, I was 12 and had been raising children for 6 years. I watched Mom in the hospital, accepting congratulations and cooing over her beautiful surprise, while I sat in the corner mentally calculating how much sleep I'd lose with another infant in the house. The nurses complimented her on how helpful I was, how naturally I held the baby, how responsible I seemed. "You're so lucky to have such a mature daughter," one said. Mom just smiled and agreed, never mentioning that her mature daughter had been functioning as an unpaid nanny and housekeeper since elementary school. High school was when everything started unraveling. I was exhausted constantly, falling asleep in classes, missing assignments because I'd been up all night with sick children or because family crises took priority over homework. My grades, which had always been decent despite everything, began to slip. Teachers started asking questions. When I missed 3 days straight because Amy had pneumonia and someone needed to take her to doctor appointments, my English teacher pulled me aside. "Emma, is everything okay at home?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked gently. "You seem to carry a lot of responsibility for someone your age." For the first time in years, an adult was asking me directly about my experience. Not asking my mother about how helpful I was, not commenting on how mature I seemed, but actually asking me how I was doing. I almost broke down right there. Almost told her everything, about the government benefits that never seemed to benefit the children they were meant for, about raising babies since I was barely out of toddlerhood myself, about parents who had abdicated every responsibility except the ones that came with monthly checks. Instead, I said I was fine. The habit of protecting the family's secret was too ingrained. But Mrs. Rodriguez planted a seed. She started checking in with me regularly, offering to let me eat lunch in her classroom when I needed quiet, helping me catch up on assignments. She never pushed, but she made it clear that she saw me, really saw me, in a way that most adults never had. It was Mrs. Rodriguez who helped me apply for college scholarships my senior year. While Mom complained that I was being selfish for wanting to leave, that the family needed me, Mrs. Rodriguez helped me understand that getting an education wasn't abandonment, it was survival. "You've given more than any child should ever be asked to give," she told me one afternoon as we worked on scholarship essays. "You deserve a chance to live your own life." The guilt was overwhelming. How could I leave Lily, Tommy, Sarah, Jake, and Amy? Who would take care of them? But I was 18, and for the first time, I had a choice. I got a full scholarship to a state school 3 hours away. When I told my parents, Dad grunted and went back to his beer. Mom cried, not from pride, but from anger. "How can you do this to us?" she sobbed. "How can you abandon your family? We need you here. The children need you. The children need parents," I said quietly. "They need their actual parents to take care of them. Don't you dare lecture me about parenting," she snapped. "I've done my best with 5, 6 children. You have no idea how hard it's been." I looked at her, really looked at her. At 38, she'd never held a job for longer than a few months. She'd never gotten up in the night with her babies, never worried about whether there was enough food, never sacrificed anything meaningful for her children's well-being. Her best had been forcing her eldest child to raise the rest while she collected benefits and played victim. "You're right," I said. "I have no idea how hard it's been for you. But I know exactly how hard it's been for me." I left for college that fall. The guilt followed me, phone calls from Mom about how the kids were struggling without me, how I was being selfish, how I'd abandoned my responsibilities. But I also started therapy through the campus counseling center and learned words for what had happened to me: parentification, neglect, emotional abuse. My siblings and I stayed close. I called them regularly, visited when I could, and sent money I couldn't afford to help with things they needed. But I also maintained boundaries I'd never been allowed to have before. Tommy called me when he was 16, asking if he could come live with me while he finished high school. I was 25 by then, working my first real job after college, living in a tiny apartment I could barely afford. But I said yes, because I remembered being 16 and desperate for someone to choose me for once. One by one, my siblings found their way to me when they were old enough. Not because I was naturally nurturing, but because I was the only adult in their lives who had ever consistently put their needs first, even when I was a child myself. Mom still tells people I was naturally nurturing, that I just loved helping with my siblings. She's never acknowledged what she stole from me, never apologized for the childhood I lost or the trauma of being forced into premature adulthood. But my siblings know the truth. And now, when people comment on how responsible they all turned out despite their upbringing, we don't credit natural nurturing or family values. We credit survival, and the love between children who only had each other when the adults failed them completely.